30 years ago, I was diagnosed with a bipolar depression disorder, and I was a mess. It didn't come in my youth. It came when I was 36 years old in the 90s, after working 11 years as a financial auditor. I didn't know what was going on. I knew that stress, I thought I had it under control. After all, I audited billions of dollars. I lived in spreadsheets and in regulations. I thought it was me, or I didn't know if it was me or the numbers. My friend said, "You're changing." I had two sons, the oldest of the young one, Michael Jr., and then Patrick. They called me the Hawk, the green monster, this madman, screaming and yelling. And then I wanted to be their friend. The only friend I had is my baby girl, Lynette. In her eyes, I couldn't do wrong. My doctor was concerned about my lack of sleep, my high elevated rate, my poor appetite. So he suggested that I see a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist. No, I thought about it, but then I went. I remember when Dr. G invited me into her beautifully designed office. There was purple shades everywhere. The colors were vibrant. There was these little objects swinging slowly in different directions. There was a fish aquarium in a corner filled with vibrant, synchronized movements of colorful fish. And I can remember she said, "Sit back and relax in this chase while I review your results." And I just knew. She'll say, "You're stressed. You need a little time off." But instead, she messed up my mellow mood by saying, "You have a bipolar depression disorder, and it's more manic." I froze for a moment. I thought about it. I smiled. I said, "Who, me? A Gemini? Now with a bipolar depression disorder?" I laughed too. And then I teared up. Thought about a black man. It hit me hard. She just gave me an access card to mental illness, and stigma was stamped all over it. I thought about now would come the long discussions about therapy, timelines, and medication. Oh, wow, medication. A clinical trial is what she said you would need to go on. First, it'd be lithium, very powerful drug. Then Prozac, just as powerful. And then she said, "Why not? You need to go on Depakote and Prozac." Depakote is not even an anti-drug, it's for seizures. That medication made me feel like a zombie, foggy. I had all kind of condition, disconnected. I didn't even feel like I needed to move forward. But I took her advice. And then I thought about how did my life become so stressful? In 1982, a little stress, I had my first child. But a year later, I got a job working as a state auditor, a traveling auditor, and I was assigned to northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, the UP. Imagine this, a black man walking through their office with a suit and tie with authority and purpose. That didn't work well for many of them. I can remember one incident. I was in a field office, and I came back from lunch, and somebody made sure that I saw this black gorilla on a noose swinging near my desk. Another incident, I was walking to the movie theater with my white coworker, JD. And as we walked into that movie, a car drove by, and someone yelled from that car, "Hey, nigga!" JD was so embarrassed. He said, "You jerk." But he didn't realize the magnitude of what I had to deal with. I was dying with this silent anger. And my complaints went unnoticed. From that day on, those weeks that we had to spend up there, I ate my meals from my hotel room because I didn't want to deal with it. But I could hear Mama telling me, Michael, you got to kill him in kindness. Her favorite words. And I tried because that was our motto in our family. I tried. But that didn't work. So I had to make these gestures of being ready to all those trips ended. I was ready to come home, even to face sometimes family crisis. I had been stressed out, overwhelmed, and seeking solitude. But I had a 10-year-old son, Michael Jr. He had a whole lot of attitude and needed attention. So solitude just wasn't happening that weekend. Finally, I realized that I had to change jobs to be closer home. And I did. I took a job at Local 7 UAW here in Detroit as a financial bookkeeper. Finally, I saw people who looked like me. But years went by and I realized I needed more for my family. I had a new insurance plan with a new doctor and therapist, but they put me on that similar medicine that made me feel like a zombie. And just like any other man, we could make an excuse to stop doing something. And I did. But for two reasons why I stopped taking my medicine. One, it made me feel bad. The second reason is that I was recommended to be one of the 3 state auditors at the new casinos being built in Detroit. And I could not allow that medicine to slow me down. That was a high-profile job. And then when I got hired, I was selected to be the auditor in charge of the first casino, MGM Grand, that was going to open first. And it was an honor, but it came with a lot of costs. There was meetings, there was deadlines. Now that I'm off my medication, there was all these things going on, and I couldn't regulate to their understanding all these different debates. When I had stopped my medicine, I thought that I would just take a whole lot of St. John worth, the move support with vitamins. It made me feel even worse. And then it happened. I got up one day and went to work and sitting there ready for these meetings, and my heart started to pound. Then I started to sweat, and then I passed out in the casino, the worst time ever. Being carried out on a gurney, just embarrassing. And the rumors are going to start. I rushed back to my therapist as soon as I recovered. My awesome therapist, Melissa, she knew my story. She encouraged me to work with habits because of my background. I was all into it. I actually started exploring the habit loop, a clue, a routine, and a reward over and over again. That's what I needed to do. I kept doing that until I was anchored in my habits. But she said, I also want you to think about these 3 exercises. First, I want you to work with daily affirmations. Affirmations of who you are and what you want for that day. I said, I can do that. I'm Michael Wynn. I'm a winner. I'm going to have a great day. I did those affirmations every day until I built my confidence up that this is me. And she said, now I want you to find or identify a place that you can pray, meditate, and speak to positivity. Read something positive. I said, I can do that. I found a place to read the Bible. And I got into the Bible. Then I found a place to read this awesome book by Les Brown, Uptime for Down Times. Encouraging words. And I can hear him say, don't let somebody else's opinion become your reality. I was dealing with mental illness as a stigma. That's all I needed. I said, hey, I can do this. And then she said, I have one other challenge. I need you to challenge your negative thoughts. I said, well, I'm working at a casino and I'm dealing with my 16-year-old defiant son. My God, that's a hard one. I can clearly remember one day I was taking Michael Jr. to his football game. He played for St. Martin de Porres. And during that time, he was waiting on me in the family room playing video games. And when it was time to go, I said, put up your stuff, son, it's time to go. And he said, I'll get it later. And then I said, no, sir, I need you to get it now. And I can remember him mumbling something or ignoring me and took it his time, and I lost it. I said, son, get your ass in there and get that stuff now. I stood there, he stood there, he walked in my face as big as he is. And he said, you just a fake ass Christian. I looked and I said, I'm thinking to myself, my temper was rising. Hey, y'all, some furniture got moved around. We got into that tussle. And when we was in that tussle, all I'm thinking about is this boy who get 33 hours in labor. His mama had to deal with him. This boy born in February at 9:28 at night. 7 pounds, 16 ounces. I watched him come through that birth sack, and I said, that boy gonna be just like me. And now we sitting in this situation. Because during that tussle, he hurt his leg. All I know is they went in the clinic, I sat in the car, I don't know what was said, but when he came back out with that brace on his leg, I felt awful. I felt so bad, I knew he wouldn't be playing football that day. And our lives would change. Months later, I'm still working on challenging my negative thoughts. And I had the most unusual experience. I was walking the grounds of the casino, taking my break, and I stopped into the casino structure, the parking structure. And I sat there, and I went over my affirmations to give me some confidence to go back and deal with the situation I was dealing with. And when I got up to walk back in, there was 2 ladies that walked in front of me. And I overheard one of them say, that man that was in that suit, that man is crazy. The other lady said, no, he is not. That man is speaking his mind. And I stopped and said, my God, she just reminded me. Don't allow somebody else's opinion define your reality. And I wrapped my thoughts around what she said. She made me feel that I was on the right path with my habits to receive my reward. Remember, a clue, a routine, and a reward. A few years later, unfortunately, I divorced my first wife and I remarried later. Michael Jr. and I situation was still it's odd at each other. We wouldn't talk. We would yell and scream. And Joyce, my second wife, said, I'm not having this anymore. You guys got to get yourself together. And I learned from her words that I had to sit and listen to the words, process what he was saying, understand that even I can disagree with him, or maybe he have a point. But it was hard. Now I'm trying to work with a 42-year-old man who's probably still thinking about that tussle 25 years ago. And I'm trying at best to build a better relationship. And we worked hard at understanding. But there was this instance that in the process of learning, and I was fortunate first to get off of that medication officially. And I can hear the words of Angela. She says, once the healing takes place, go out and heal someone else. And that became my mission. I said, my son and I. But then I said, well, it's not healing him, it's us. And that relationship, that might be an overnight fix. That's, we got to do more. In the meantime, I worked with men who was depressed and stressed out to share my transparency so they can see the possibilities of being healing. With my financial background, I work with outreach programs to teach them about financial literacy and how to avoid financial stress, because stress leads to the rest, depression and anxiety. And in the meantime, as I was growing, obviously my son was paying attention. At 42 years old, December 2024, he told me, I appreciate you. And soon after, a Facebook friend request came. As small as that might seem to some of y'all, that meant a lot to me. I've learned to listen to others and myself. And I thank Melissa, my therapist, and I thank my mentor, Norma Hollis, who was my mentor for me to get my certification in authenticity. I learned that aligning your inner and your outer and expressive voice is true authenticity, because authenticity comes with thoughts, words, and action. So if I was to be remembered as a remarkable man, I would want it for this. I sacrificed for my family. I chose to get healing and build relationships. And I let God lead me through my trials to have my victory. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for sharing that with us.